We've all been there. We've cut ourselves, or maybe we were pulling on a log or something and we weren't paying attention to where we were pulling from the direction, and there was a stick and it jabbed you in your hand, and now you got this scrape or scratch or something. You got an open wound. Maybe you got a splinter. Maybe you burned yourself because you weren't thinking and you grabbed your cup of coffee right off the fire without grabbing a towel or something to insulate the handle, right? Like, we've all been there, and you've had to do a little bit of first aid, okay? Now, the thing with first aid, and I'm going to make this case, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a doctor, I'm first aid certified with Red Cross, CPR, but that is, I've never even taken a wilderness first aid course, okay? So I want to. It's on my plan, but someday I will. But I'm just not there yet, okay? But with basic first aid, or any other first aid really, it all comes back to your knowledge. What do you have on you that you can use to do the procedures that you need to do to make sure that you're safe and that you don't get infections, that you don't die or make the situation worse? Making the situation worse can happen. And a lot of people don't even think about that. You know, hey, I'm just going to react and do this because this is all I know. But if you take a step back and you think about it a moment, just staying calm, right? It's part of the process, stay calm, right? One of the first steps. And you think straight, is this going to cause more damage than what I really intend to do? For example, if you get a scrape on your hand, are you going to apply a tourniquet? When you panic and you see all that blood, and if you're not thinking right, and you just watch a lot of movies or something, you might be thinking, I'm losing all this blood. I need to apply a tourniquet, right? That could cause more damage than what's really necessary. So a couple weeks ago, one of my viewers suggested, hey, what would be in a to-go bag if stuff hits the fan, right? If emergency. And I love that topic. And I got to thinking, like, well, wouldn't it just be the same thing as a hiking bag or whatever? But if you're trying to set something up for a to-go bag for an emergency preparedness situation, I think there's a little bit more care that you need to take, right? And generally to-go bags, you're trying to plan for basically 2 to 3 days. So it's a weekend. So you might think, yeah, I'm just going to grab my pack, right? But does your pack really have the tools for the environment that you're going into, right? And first aid is one of those things that changes depends on where you are. So I'm here in Ohio, eastern woodlands, right? We got a deciduous forest. Is my first aid in my bag going to prepare me to be in Nevada, or Arizona, or even Colorado, right? Not necessarily. There's certain things in those areas that would either prohibit some of the things I know how to do, right? Or might actually make things a little bit easier. It just kind of depends, all right? So on my bag here, and this is not my to-go bag, actually. I got all my goodies in this bag to show you. Up on top here, you notice the first thing I've got is a Scout neckerchief. And this is a large Scout neckerchief. I'm not talking about the new Scout neckerchiefs is like 24 by 24 or whatever. It's not even a square anymore. It's just a triangle. When you get a large Scout neckerchief, which is like 38 by 38, 36 by 36 or something, it's huge, okay? You can see it's even wider than my shoulders. Having a neckerchief, having a handkerchief, neckerchief, whatever you want to call it, that is large enough for you to use in various ways is important. You can do so much with just a piece of cloth, okay? There's not going to be a video about the neckerchief. I should probably have a video just about the neckerchief. Maybe that's coming. But first aid-wise, when you're thinking about bandaging and tying, things like that, if you have something like this that you're already wearing or it's already in your pack, then you've already eliminated the need for a lot of other stuff. And it's not just the Scouts that promoted the use of the neckerchief. If you read all the historic campcraft writers, talking about what they take with them, they all have a neckerchief. Now, of course, during the times of the early 20th century, having a handkerchief or neckerchief was actually pretty commonplace anyways, right? It was just a men's accessory that you had, especially if you were in a rural area. Maybe not so much in the urban area, you'd have your hanky. But in a rural area, which most of the United States still was in the early 20th century, neckerchiefs were common. You use them for a lot of different things. You use them to wipe your brow. You use them to wet and keep yourself cool. Out west, you use them to wrap around your face to keep out the dust. So having a neckerchief in all of its different uses, if you're a man, especially at the time, you already knew a lot of these different things. It was just second nature. So that's why I'm putting it out here for first aid, having a neckerchief, because especially during the early 20th century, it was just average, everyday accessory, especially if you're a man, okay? So you have your neckerchief. What else are you going to need? Luckily, there's a lot of good writing about what should be carried in a personal first aid kit. Kephart believed in a very limited first aid kit just to take with you hiking, and it all fit in a little tobacco can. When you think about Prince Albert, those little tiny red thin cans, you could fit a couple Band-Aids in there and some ointments and you're good to go. And that was his first aid kit that he took with him on his hikes. Nesmik, pretty much the same thing, but Nesmik also put a lot more influence on knowing botany, knowing the different plants and the uses. The more you know, the less you have to carry. Now, there's a lot of discrepancies historically about historic medicine versus today's medicine. So what I say in regards to botany and things, you really need to find an expert in those areas. It goes back to my last week's video, make sure your skills match what you plan to take, vice versa. If that's something that you don't know, if it's not something that you want to know, you want to be safer, which is always better to lean on the side of safety, especially when it comes to first aid, or get the training, right? Take the things that are commercially proven and known to be safe and successful. This is especially important when it comes to first aid. Now, the next thing I'm going to pull out, and I already did a video. I did a video on all these. Is this larger first aid kit. This is a great example. This is from 1947, I think. It's from 1947. Okay. Now this can teach us a lesson. And the campcraft writers also believed in taking manuals with them. And I say that because if we take a look at these examples, these historic examples, they all had various types of manuals with them to remind you about certain things, especially if you're panicking or you're scared or you're trying to help somebody out or trying to help yourself. Staying calm is important, but having a reminder is extremely useful. So you should have some type of pamphlet, some small little first aid book or whatever you have. It should be modern, shouldn't be 100 years old, right? It needs to have the most up-to-date knowledge when we're talking about first aid. But having some type of pamphlet with you is important. Some type of handbook. You should have a bandage. And I'm not going to take out all these because, this is excessive. This is a patrol-sized kit. But you should have a roll of bandage. You should have medical tape. You should probably have white petroleum jelly is what this one has. Nice thing about petroleum jelly is not only can you use it to moisturize your lips. If you're dehydrated, you can use it to moisturize your skin in case your skin gets dry. You don't want it to crack and have open sores. So that might be a medical situation that dictates you taking petroleum jelly, but you can also apply to some cotton balls and use it as a fire starter, going back to last week. Having some Q-tips for applicators can be handy. You want to make sure you have scissors, tweezers, for those splinters, for those ticks, and other nasties that you need to get. Now in this large kit, it has the gauze bandages. It has mercurochrome, but instead of mercurochrome, you want to take another modern antibiotic ointment, okay? I don't think you need to say anything more about that. You really don't need smelling salts because if you're especially by yourself, you're going to be in a position where it's not going to do any good if you faint or if you have issues. Having water purification tablets, I think, is a good idea to have in your first aid kit as well. If you like this video, please click like. That way other people find it. We really appreciate it. All right, now if we take a look at two other first aid kits from the early 20th century, two different versions. They both come with a little booklet, just like I said. They both come with an antibiotic, the mercurochrome. They both come with rolled bandage. This also came with some tape bandage, but it's gone. And they also came with the little Band-Aids, okay, for small cuts and scrapes. So having a couple Band-Aids could be useful. They also have scissors to cut the bandage or to cut maybe your cloth into strips, whatever you need to, right? So having some scissors is really important. They also had water treatment tablets, small little bottle of water treatment tablets. They had little swabs, you know, we're talking about the cotton swabs. They had Bernalay, so having some type of burn ointment. If you're in the sun, if you're like me and your complexion is like me, you get sunburn really easy. So having some aloe or some other type of skin ointment that you can use to help recover from those burns is really important. Poison ivy ointment. I think that's pretty important because we're going out in the woods, right? At least in our circumstance, you're going out hiking. And even if you are not susceptible to poison ivy right off the bat, you never know when your body's actually going to start being susceptible. I have a good friend who grew up as a kid, never caught poison ivy, would just laugh at others when we'd go camping and things like that. But as he got older, his body started to develop an intolerance, and now he gets poison ivy. He's very frustrated with it, but that's the fact of life. I don't get poison ivy easily. I can get it, I just usually don't get it. It's a little bit harder for me to get it. I pretty much have to be rolling in the stuff to get it, but my body doesn't react to it as bad as many other people get it. So knowing yourself, but just having it isn't going to be a big deal. Make sure that whatever part of the country that you live in, if you have something specifically that you need to take care of in your region, you take it with you. Here we got poison ivy, we have poison oak, we have poison sumac. You got your Band-Aids, rolled bandage, and tape. This one also has some like aspirin. So that brings up another thing. If you are a person that has medications, you have to take that into consideration. In your to-go bag, you want to have a sampling of at least 3 days worth, of the medications that you take on a regular basis. And you're probably not going to sleep very well the first night when you're outdoors. Some people might disagree with me on this, and especially if it is a something hits the fan kind of situation, you're thinking about safety or whatever. But having a good night's sleep is extremely important for your body to react well to things. And if you're not used to knowing how to deal with those kind of situations, if you are sleep deprived, you are not going to make good choices. So in your first aid kit, I would also suggest that you have some type of sleep aid to help you. Okay? That way your body can recover from the day. It goes back to morale and everything, but can recover from the day, and your following days to get wherever you're going for safety or whatever it is goes better. Think about your sleep along with the care of your wounds. Think about your other things about health. Hence why you have the water tablets in your first aid kit. Because in an emergency situation, your first aid, you gotta have clean water to drink. You gotta have clean water to do whatever you need to do. Now, our forefathers in campcraft, they really don't mention a whole lot about sleep because at the time, they did have some sleep aids. Yeah, just take a swig of whiskey and you're good to go, right? They had some historical methods of dealing with sleep issues, but the medicines that they had at the time were actually fairly limited. You could take opium, right? Like they had some really good drugs at the time to solve whatever they needed to solve, but they weren't necessarily good, and it's not something that you want to use today. Okay, so for campcraft riders, what they had was very basic, and chances are for just 3 days, for not long term, and this depends on your area, the climate, the terrain, and things like that, but you're most likely just going to come across some scrapes, some bruises, and maybe a burn. So whatever you have in your first aid kit, if it can handle those things, then you're probably pretty good. And if something really, really bad happens, having a large handkerchief, neckerchief, whatever you want to call it, to handle a tourniquet situation, wrap it around your head, put it into a triangular sling, things like that would be very useful. And that goes back to skill. So with all this stuff, it goes back to the skill. If you don't have the skill for some reason to make a triangular sling, maybe you want to have a already prepared sling in your first aid kit. If you don't know how to make a tourniquet, it's not that hard to make a tourniquet, but if you're not prepared on how to make a tourniquet, then you can go buy a pre-made tourniquet. Okay? There's things you can do in wilderness first aid. And if you know how to look for the signs, you know if you did it right, if you did it wrong, and you'll be okay. Okay? So get the training, whatever you need, especially with first aid at the very least. Before you do any major excursions, get Red Cross first aid certified, take a CPR course. That way you're good to go. All right? So if you have any suggestions that you think the historic campcraft riders would use in their to-go bags with historical application, then please leave a comment below. Let's help each other out. I'd love to get your feedback. But B.S.A, that's the guy's name. I couldn't remember last video if I remember right. B.S.A, Kephart, Nesmick, Baden-Powell, Ernest Thompson Seton, Edward Caves, all these other guys in their books, they all pretty much say the same thing as far as the basic first aid kit. They all have that in common, but all rest of it goes back to skills, knowing how to use what you have out there and on your person so that you can get by, so you can get to safety. All right, we're not talking about major surgeries here. No need for a tracheotomy. No, just get the basic things and you will be suited. You'll be more comfortable. Emergency situation happens, right? Because you'll know how to respond to it, and the panic's not going to go down. The morale's going to go up. Like all these positive things. Getting the special skills will allow you to use all these things effectively and in lots of different ways. So, all right. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you're interested in getting on my newsletter, please send me actually below in the description box with all my different links, including with some of the suggestions that I have in this video for you to explore and see if you like it. But I have a link there. You just go to it's like a Google Doc, and you put in your email address. Don't even need your name, and I put you on the email list. So you got a monthly newsletter of various things. It's coming out. Want to give a shout out to my patrons on Patreon, because without them, this channel just wouldn't be able to do what it's able to do. Whatever you can give is sincerely appreciated and goes directly back into this channel and moving it forward. So thank you so much if you're considering that, and if you are one of my patrons on Patreon. I appreciate you. If you would like to see an in-depth video of comparing various historic first aid kits, then check out this video here. If you're interested in my videos about campcraft skills, then check this one out here. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Give a kiss out to your loved ones, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.